Sharon Thomason is going to come in with us today, and she lives in Panama City, Florida, with her husband. Together, they care for their son, Randy, who has Huntington's disease. Sharon received her BS and MA from Florida State University and taught English and journalism in public school system for 38 years. She began working with Help for HD in 2014 as editor of the Huntington's Post and as a member of our executive board. Education and advocacy has been her passion ever since. She has written and edited over 5 books, Life Interrupted, Volumes 1 and 2, Living with Huntington's Disease, What I've Learned as a Caregiver, and I Fight for Understanding, and What is Wrong with Emma, as well as numerous brochures and other education materials, including webinars and other LEAP and EMT materials. She has spoken out about HD nationally and internationally at conferences. She began this fight in 1983 and is still waiting for a cure. Helen is in 2018, she began her HD journey when she had to drag her son David in to doctors trying to find out what was wrong with him. They didn't know that HD was in the family. They kept saying that he had a B12 deficiency. David was finally diagnosed correctly in 2021. He was in mid-stage by then and had been showing symptoms since 2010. That's 11 years of showing symptom and not having a diagnosis. She also has a stepdaughter, Sonia, who's in mid-stage. Sonia was also misdiagnosed with cerebral spinal ataxia until David got his diagnosis so she could get her correct diagnosis. She has a daughter, Cassandra, who tested positive last month, a stepson, Chuck, and daughter, Jessica, who tested positive last month as well. And these, which meant they knew that other people were at risk in the family, Helen. But David's diagnosis really started the whole thing for the family, it sounds like. Yeah. David has been, so since then, obviously Helen is David's caregiver, and she's learning along the way things that are making it easier to be a caregiver that we are going to talk about today. We still don't have Melissa on with us.
So Michael, can you move her over, please?
She's not sick.
Oh,
okay. So Melissa, who's coming on, her husband, Michael, is 46 years old. He's HD positive with a CAG of 48. He was misdiagnosed since 2019 because they didn't have HD in family history. It was revealed after her husband started having some neurological symptoms. His father, and so that's when he learned his father that he thought was his biological father was not. They have a 13-year-old daughter, beautiful, happy Ava, and she has JHD with a CAG of 79. She was also previously misdiagnosed as being autistic. Her 17-year-old son, though this is actually an old bio, he is now 18 years old and he is at risk. And so he's talking about getting tested very soon. Their family slogan is find joy. There's still plenty of time to find joy and have much to be thankful for despite HD. Finally, we have Lauren Holder, and she's the producer and host of Help for HD Live, the first ever podcast created for HD community by the HD community. She is also a walk manager for the Alzheimer's Association. Lauren got involved in the HD community after her grandfather was diagnosed with the disease. She has become very involved in fundraising and advocacy efforts in North Carolina, where she began as the chapter president of the HDSA, North Carolina chapter. She later became a member of the National Field Committee of HDSA. However, her greatest contribution was when her father was diagnosed with HD and she stopped everything to become his caregiver for the next several years. After his passing in January of 2021, she continued to fight by joining other HD advocacy groups in the effort to raise awareness and the urgency that is felt within the gene-positive pre-symptomatic subgroup of people with HD for effective treatments and their willingness to take part on the risk of participating in clinical trials in order to help accelerate HD research. So awesome panel, really excited to have everybody with us today. So I'm going to start with the first question is going to go to Helen. Helen, what type of foods do you recommend for someone that is having early stage swelling issues? And those glasses are super cool, Sharon, by the way. Go ahead, Helen.
Okay, first, I started out eliminating things from David's diet. He was choking on rice, chow mein noodles, toast, crackers, anything very dry, I noticed. So when I eliminated rice and chow mein noodles, I decided to start adding any type of pasta noodles to that kind of food. So we use spiral noodles for chow mein. We use egg noodles for under chili because he loved chili and rice, that kind of thing. In banana bread and baking stuff, I will use a lot of applesauce, or I use the banana bread pudding recipe because it makes it it makes it very moist. We love zucchini bread, but I found that if I overdo it on the cinnamon, it makes it extremely moist. So I do that kind of thing. We have a recipe that we eat that calls for crumbled bacon on top. And of course, he loves bacon. So instead of crumbling, I crack it up into more like bite-sized pieces so they don't fly back in the throat and cause him to choke. I put butter and peanut butter on crackers so they'll become a little bit more moist. He likes celery with peanut butter and raisins on it, so he gets a good mixture of thick stuff there. We just finished a vacation and he loves pork rinds. And in the mountains of Ozark, I had to pull over because he was choking so bad I thought we were going to have to take him. So that's off his list. He loves corn nuts on trips too. That became a problem, but not as bad as in the mountains. That scared me to death. So what I did is we stopped and then I got like pastries with fruit, with frostings on them, and he loves blueberries. So I said, this is going to be your fruit trip. No more dry stuff that you're going to choke with. I also use a lot of gravies on the meats, just even some meats that don't call for it. I now buy jars of gravy just so that it's on hand. It makes it moist and he doesn't choke on that kind of thing. He loves beef jerky and boiled peanuts. I think the boiled peanuts may be okay, but he doesn't get them really often. He does like salted peanuts, but I've decided that I'm just not going to buy that stuff. If he can't eat it, I won't buy it. It won't be in the house, and he probably won't think about it. And that's about all I can think of at the moment. Just keeping everything moist.
Does anyone else on the panel have any suggestions with swallowing that they found when caregiving that helped their loved ones with swallowing and eating, being able to eat as long as possible? Lauren and Sharon, sorry.
For Dad, we had my aunt, who is a speech therapist, actually come and do an evaluation and tell us what would work best. There are thickeners out there to help with foods. There's also adaptive devices, special spoons and straws. So sometimes it's better to have a straw, sometimes it's not. And so that's where an evaluation really helps from a speech therapist, because they can tell you whether or not that person can use a straw or not, because they're trained to know what to look for and what tests to do and stuff. That was very helpful to have that. There are special cups that you can get. There are recommendations for cups and for all kinds of stuff from speech therapy. So for us, it was really making sure that things were cut up and that he went slower and just paced himself, because he would try to eat really fast because he loved everything, especially if he was getting a favorite food. So yeah, and then just making sure to drink with eating, so you have that liquid to help it all go down. All those things were learned from speech therapy.
Thank you.
We-
Welcome, Melissa.
We got those same tips to slow down on the eating, which is really a challenge. He wants to just wolf everything down. So to take a bite and then take a sip of something. And also to tuck his chin when he's swallowing. Those are the only things I can think of to add.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. The next question is for Lauren. I am conflicted and would like feedback from someone who may not know me. I don't want to test for fear of it stopping me from going into the military, but I want to know if I have HD. What would you do in my position?
This is a hard one. So it's very personal to test, and I understand wanting to test, but if you are wanting, like, that is your dream to go into the military, and this is coming from a knowledge of research that I've done, because my husband was in the military when I tested, and so I wanted to know what stipulations were. So I did some research back when I tested, and at that time, you could not have an HD diagnosis and or a genetic test and be in the military. So I would not recommend testing at this time if you're wanting to get into the military. Save it for later. You have time to do it. And then later on, look at your options, get everything sorted out, make sure that you know what you want to do. But if your dream is the military, then I would hold off for a little while until you get established. Your other option is to do anonymous testing and just not report it medically to your primary care and everything. But that is personal decision as well. Some people don't feel comfortable with that, but that is an option if you just feel that you absolutely have to test and you still want to go into the military. Otherwise, yeah, just hold off for a little bit.
Thank you.
I think so many times with testing, I know that Madison's getting to that age where, she can test now, right? She's 19. And I think about, honey, what do you want to do when you grow up? Because sometimes it's gonna affect your future getting tested right now and you don't have symptoms. It's so hard as a 19-year-old to explain that.
And I am very pro getting tested. Not that I would force anybody to do it, but I definitely think there is a benefit to getting tested most of the time. But when you're dealing with certain situations, it's better to hold off because you have time. And so it's not like when you turn 18, you absolutely have to go and do it. The gene's going to be there one way or another. So it's not going to change that. It's the knowledge. And so if you can wait a little longer mentally and emotionally for that result and go and do your dream of being in the military, that's better because they don't like having somebody with HD in the military.
So our next question is for Sharon. I care for my child with HD and he refuses to take medication. The doctor will prescribe it. He will agree to take it, but then won't. What are the options here? And tell us about your experience with this.
This is a really tough one, and it's something that we went through for 7 years. Randy would take the medicine and then he would go off the medicine and he would end up back in the hospital, and we would go in about 3-month cycles of that. And finally he ended up in the state mental hospital. And by then I had guardianship. In Florida, they call it plenary guardianship. It's guardianship over not just finances, but decisions about the person's medical care and where they live and that sort of thing. And so I could decide that if he wouldn't take the medicine, that they would give him the shots. And once they gave him shots, he got stabilized enough that he decided that he would take the medicine, the oral medication. And from that point on, we haven't had any problems. And he got out in 2014. So it's been 8 years now, almost in the fall, it'll be 8 years that he has stayed on his medication. And it's because he got stabilized and realized how much better things were when he was on the medication. And he didn't want to go back in the hospital anymore.
Our next question is for Melissa. I miss my husband thinking of me, doing for me, and being my partner. Does this continue to get worse? Will I ever have a chance to have more intimate times with him?
Yeah, so I think like everybody, all these questions are difficult ones to answer. I think for me, what helped was to just lower my expectations and get out of the mindset of what was, because you're in the process of dealing with the diagnosis and dealing with what your new normal is. So having to just change up your mindset of, is he going to initiate something as simple as sitting on the couch with me? And I had to learn that, and he did vocalize that he wasn't doing it intentionally. I think I felt for the longest time that he was intentionally doing this to hurt my feelings, and learning that it was the disease and him communicating to me that it's just not in the forefront of his mind, that he legitimately forgets to do those things, that it's no longer in the front of his mind anymore. So a lot of times what we have to adjust as a partner and spouse is just saying to our loved ones, come give me a hug and come snuggle with me on the couch, and kind of remind them to do those things. And it does take a little bit to get used to, but again, you just have to get in that mindset that it's not how it used to be anymore. And you just have to be okay with making that initiation in terms of affection and things like that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Melissa. And I know with Mike, I think a lot of times it was like, I would see other couples, right? You see your friends or you see your other, and that was like the hardest thing, because they had this, and let me tell you, it was not perfect behind the closed doors. But for me, it was like, and then Mike was just like, he couldn't, and I had to also try to think, he probably felt that loss too. He may not have been able to articulate that, but we had a great marriage and a young love. I think we probably both missed it. It's just,
It definitely was something that even recently, Michael broke down emotionally because it was painful for him. And he admitted to me that it hurts him knowing that he is hurting me unintentionally. And so I thought that meant a lot to me and really helped me to understand a little bit what he's thinking and feeling as well.
great.
I'd like to say something about this question too.
Yeah.
From a mother-son perspective, you lose the intimacy, that not physical, of course, but the connection with your children too. I, for a long time, thought that David, when he would just walk 40 feet in front of me, was doing it on purpose because he was annoyed with me. I realized that he doesn't even realize that he's leaving me behind. He doesn't realize that he's not giving me the hugs. He used to constantly after meals go, that was excellent, or I love that. And he doesn't do that kind of thing. And so I've asked him about it. And he too says, I don't think about it. And so when I want a hug, I go tell him, I need a hug. I want a kiss. You need to stay with me because I need some human contact and that kind of thing. Just make a joke out of it. And then he responds.
Awesome.
So
I think that's what's so great about, I'm sorry. It's just,
No,
I think
please.
that's what's so great about kids is kids don't think to ask for a hug. They just go and do it. Like they just run up and hug. And the person with HD needs that. They need that connection too. Even though they can't communicate it, they don't think about it. It's still something that they need to know that they're still a part of stuff. And I think if we were more like that, just willing to go up to somebody, hug instead of waiting for them to ask or anything, it would just make such a huge difference, because I realized that about my kid with my dad. And now with my grandfather with Alzheimer's, they're doing the same thing. And it just made me really think about, oh, I have to do that. I have to be in that same mindset. So it's just really good to hear these stories.
So you're up, Lauren. Every time I make a poor decision or do something off, my family thinks it's my HD symptoms starting to show. I feel like I'm not symptomatic yet. How do I cope with other people's judgment? Other people's judgment.
Welcome to the club. When it comes to other people's judgment, you have to remember that who you're getting the judgment from. Is it somebody who is truly trying to help you? Or is it somebody who is just overly critical and they don't really know you? If it is somebody that you are very close to and you feel that they are trying to help you, then I would recommend asking them, like, what do you see? What is it that you see that you think could be symptoms? Or go talk to a neurologist and ask for a referral to a neuropsych to get a baseline study to see if you have any deficits. And just side note, that was best decision I ever made. Really helped with my anxiety when it came to symptoms. If it's from somebody who doesn't really know you and they're just being mean and trying to blame everything on HD, ignore them. They don't matter, because the people who really know you are going to come to you and talk to you about that and not be cruel because they know how much it hurts. Anybody else, they don't matter. Just ignore them. And I would even take it as an opportunity to educate them on HD. Oh, let me tell you a little bit more about what it is that you're criticizing, and just don't take it personally, because people just don't know, or sometimes people are just cruel. So they're not worth your time. But everybody else, it's okay to go, okay, if you see something, why don't you tell me so I can see what I can do to be proactive? Because there may be something else going on. You could have thyroid issues causing mood problems, or you could have whatever else going on and get help, and it's really not symptoms.
And I think you said something, Lauren, that was really interesting, because if someone is like blaming HD for a fight, oh, we got in a fight, right? And it's your HD, that's why we got in a fight. That's not fair. That's cruel. So the people that really care about you may come and say, I noticed that you have this movement in your finger more. Do you think like we should go to the doctor? Or do you think that I can support you? That's the difference. Or then someone taking blame off their bad behavior or themselves and put it on you because it's Huntington's. If people do that to you, that's when get rid of them.
And I will also point out that if you do get into a fight with somebody and they try to do that to you, if it's somebody that you love and care for and you never expected them to do it, give them a little grace, because people get frustrated and say things that they don't mean sometimes. If it happens one time, you can forgive and be like, okay, well, I'm just going to ignore it. If somebody does that to you regularly, get out. Just don't even, it's so toxic, and it's not something that we as people with HD need. You need as much love and support as possible, and nobody deserves to treat you that way. So yeah, be around the people who are going to legitimately tell you if something is going on to help you, versus somebody who's just being cruel.
That's awesome. Thank you. Again, Lauren, you're up again. Spacing wasn't our good suit here. So I am furious when community members tell me they wouldn't have had their kids if they knew they were going to have HD. What that says to me is that my life doesn't have value. Have you or your loved ones had to deal with this? If yes, how did you respond?
Yes, the answer is yes. This is something that I've personally dealt with. Very hard to deal with, very hurt about it. I actually stepped back in talking to people for a while because it's something that really affected me. And what I can say is what's right for you, and your decision for you is yours alone, nobody else's, and nobody should judge you. And nobody in this community should be judging anybody else. It's supposed to be about support. When somebody is going through what we're going through, we need support. And when a caregiver, I've had it too. I've had people say it to me, and it makes me so mad, because you're right. It devalues us. It tells us that we don't have a right to a normal life because of a brain disease we didn't ask for. So that's not the truth. We absolutely 100% still deserve to have a normal life, and nobody should be taking that away from us. And I understand that frustration, and I am very vocal, so I tend to just talk to people about my experience and then explain my feelings. If you're not comfortable with that, walk away. Just walk away from it, and remember that your decisions are your own, and that the people in this community, that is a minority of responses. The people in this community who are truly dealing with what you are dealing with will be there and support you, and will not ever make you feel that way, because this is a community of support, and your decision is yours, and it's not right or wrong.
Yeah. I think in our support group, we have support groups, and that's one thing. Sharon runs our caregiver support group, and there is no judgment. And when people start doing that, and you can feel the hurt, if someone says, who don't have children, I don't think any of you should have had children. Oh, it's time for you to leave the support group. You know what I mean? It's just, you're right. We need support, not judgment. Doesn't work. So
it doesn't work. And it really does make you feel like you're a burden. And if we're a burden, then why are we here? If we don't have a right to a life, then why are we here? And that's not how it should be. None of us asked for this, and none of us should feel that we have to completely stop something as important as kids, because they're life changing and they change your perspective on everything. And I would never take them back. That is the best decision I ever made. And I was faced with that decision. I did chorionic villus sampling the first time when I found out I was pregnant, and my daughter is HD free. The second time I chose not to test because it was very traumatic for me to go through that process first and wait. And it was worse getting her tested than it was testing myself. And so when I got pregnant with my son, I chose not to test and got a lot of backlash from it, but it was my decision. My husband was even like, why aren't we not getting him tested? And I told him, I said, I can't go through it. You know what? That's okay for me to say. That was my decision. And he said, what are you going to say to our son when he's old enough to understand? And I said, I'm going to tell him the truth. I will be transparent and tell him exactly why he's at risk and his sister isn't. And I will give him the option, like I had, to test when he's old enough to make the decision. And that's all I can do as a parent. Me having HD doesn't make me a bad parent or mean that I can't have kids. So I don't want anybody to ever feel that judgment, because it sucks. It absolutely sucks to have somebody sit there and act like you don't have a right to have children and a life because of HD.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lauren. Our next question is from Melissa. I have a husband that is in mid stages, but I also have children with JHD. And I wonder, in an event of an emergency, how would I ensure both are safe? Like fire, dangerous situation, or anything like that, that you are in public or in the home.
Katie, before I answer my question, could I just piggyback on what Lauren was saying really
Yeah.
quick?
Of course.
So I just wanted to put it out there too. Being that we have an 18-year-old son that is at risk for Huntington's, I will say that he's said so many times, in spite of his risk of potentially developing Huntington's, that he loves his life. He is so glad that he was born, because I know right away when we told him about HD, he was like, do you wish that you never would have had me? And it's, even if we would have known beforehand, he's just so thankful for his life. Even with our daughter with juvenile, yes, it is very hard, but she considers herself a JHD warrior, and there's still happiness there and much to be thankful for. So I just wanted to put that out there too. Even though it can be a hard situation, they're still both very thankful for being here. But then with my question, it's an easy answer. I think if you take HD out of the equation, Mike and I both, I'm looking at him, we're both on the same page that the children would come first. So we would get Miss Ava first at the house, like I think any loving parent would do. We sacrifice ourselves for our children. So that was a no-brainer for us. So I said, in spite of HD, even with HD, it would be the same thing. So Ava would come first.
Yeah, I actually love that answer. I haven't
Yeah.
heard that yet, because we've talked about this, and a lot of these questions we've heard over the years, and like people have talked and discussed, and we want different perspectives. And that is, as any mother, all of us are mothers on this stream, and I mean on this panel. And yes, you would save your child any day of the week. It's just our instinct. But yeah, and I think one thing that was brought up when we talked about this a couple of years ago was if there is any like questions about emergency services, reach out to emergency services. I honestly don't think they're going to have the answer for you. I think this is a very hard, unique situation that you have a child that's disabled and a parent that's disabled that needs so much help. But maybe they have strategies that they've used for care homes. I don't know, but let's lean on hopefully the emergency services maybe having some ideas on how that happens. I don't know.
Yeah. Again, Melissa, my 18-year-old is ready for college, and I am worried about some of the things she does. I don't want to create anxiety for her, but I also want her to be aware of what I see. Should I mention my concerns or keep an eye out for now?
So this was interesting because I asked Evan, our son, what his perspective was on everything. I'll share with you my perspective first, and then I'll just briefly share with you what our son thought. So in our home, and I can only speak for what we do. We put everything out on the table. Like we're very open and honest, have like our little family meetings where we talk about everything and everybody's willing to share what it is that they have to say. So I always believe that honesty is the best policy with everything in terms of Huntington's, and just putting it out there and helping to remove some of the stigma and shame associated with Huntington. I know life is difficult already. It's even more difficult with HD. That's just once you have that HD thrown in there, your life has changed, and you're going to have a tougher road to walk sometimes. And that's just the way it is. So I think in order to prepare ahead of time and know as much as you can, and have that self-awareness and self-recognition of, hey, this is in my family. This is something I need to look out for. I think it's good. Now, when I talked to our son, this is what he said. I'll read it because he put it down. He said that ultimately a parent knows what is best and what is best for the child. He said some people that might have a lot of anxiety might break down and have it become all consuming. He said he was like that for a period of about 1.5 years when he first found out with the Huntingtons, that it was in our family. He said it might be a good idea if they're going to college to put it off until a later time, and maybe they're more mentally ready to handle that information. So he says in that instance that teens' life and education is what is most important right now. If that person were to become hyper fixated on HD, and depending what she is doing in college and everything, she might look to find ways to cope. And then sometimes that would make the situation difficult. So I just appreciated his perspective. So I just thought I would share that.
Melissa, can I say one thing? I love that you guys are so transparent, and like you sat down and asked him that. I think that's key right there. Just sitting and saying, what would you have liked? And just having a plan in place, and maybe that's it, right? Like before somebody seeing something, have that discussion before that ever happens and they leave and say, what would you want? Just as like we do advanced directives and wills and stuff, have your teenager be like, this is what I would want. So
yeah,
I love
and
that.
I thank you. I just believe that knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And just to give that person that kind of strength and empowering, just to know this is what I'm up against. But if this is what I'm up against, I'm going to be ready for it.
But it also just shows how much you respect him, and the fact that you see him as equal and mature enough, and not, it really just shows your respect for him. So I just love that. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. HD conversations are the hardest conversations we have with our friends and families, but especially our children. And I think when we it's crazy when we open up the conversation, like the floodgates sometimes from our children, like they have so much in there that they want to talk to us about. And then we open up the gates, and it's really cool to hear their perspectives, because we think we know them, but we don't always. They have their own little minds.
If I can throw something in there.
Yeah.
One of the things that showed me just how important it is to talk about everything, I did the 5 wishes with Randy, and we went through the questions and we talked about them, and I wrote down his answers for him. And there were things that I thought I knew how he would answer, and it was the complete opposite of what I thought he would say. And so that communication is just key. And I think it's so important to respect the thoughts and the wishes of the person who has HD. Even when you become the decision maker, if you have the healthcare proxy or the guardianship or whatever, it's important that you know what they want.
Yeah. And Sharon, since you said that, and I don't know if we have questions in the future, because we go as we go, but can you tell people what 5 wishes are really quick, and how you get a hold of 5 wishes? Because that's really important for our community to know about.
Yeah, there's a website called 5wishes.org, and you can either ask for a paper copy and they send you a booklet that you write on by hand, or you can order a digital copy and then it can be a more fluid thing where you go in and change things as you want to. But it asks all kinds of detailed questions about what you want to happen as you're approaching the end of your life. And it even asks questions about what kind of burial and funeral you want, what kinds of remembrances you want. It can be as detailed as you want it to be.
Thank you for that. And I think like one thing, we're all gonna die, every single one of us.
Yep.
So if we can sit with our loved one, Katrina showed me that working in hospice for so long, like we're all gonna die. We need to sit with our loved ones and support, because we should be doing 5 wishes, even if we don't have Huntington's, even if
Right.
it doesn't matter. So to sit down and support your loved one like you did, Sharon, and let's talk about this together. It's uncomfortable, but then we both have it done. So if I die first, and if you die first, then I know. And it's just this, I think it's so important for everyone to do. If you choose. I just have to throw that in there.
And it is accepted as a legal document.
Okay, Helen, thank you, Sharon. How does your adult, and this question I'm gonna ask, but if anyone can chime in on this, because this is a problem that we face so much in the community. So if anyone has any ideas, this would be helpful for people, I'm sure. But Helen, how does your adult child respond to personal care from their parent? We are getting to the point, and I worry about how he will react as a 39-year-old man getting care from his mother.
David's a little older, he's 42. He resists showers totally. I fight with him constantly. I have one weapon. He likes to eat. And when he gets so bad, so rank that I can't stand the smell of him even sitting at the table, I tell him that you are not coming to dinner tomorrow night unless you get in that shower. I will not sit with you. I will not eat with you. I will not let you take your food to your room. And fortunately, he's compliant when I make demands. He will get in the shower. He might not shower again for another 2 weeks or so, but he will get in the shower. I don't necessarily think that he uses soap and shampoo all the time. I haven't gotten to the point with him where I will go in there yet and do it, but I have told him that I used to bathe you when you were a baby, and I will do it as an adult. And he's apathetic again, so I don't think he would really necessarily care. His hair and his beard get really awful. He gets food in him when he chokes. Unfortunately, his nose runs. He gets all sorts of gunk in his hair and beard. And so I insist on keeping them short. I think that he fights that in the way that I'm not sure if it's Huntington's or if it's him, but getting him to lift his chin to get under here to shave, use a razor. He is real stiff, moving his head around. He's real stiff. I'm sure some of it is disease, but I'm pretty sure some of it is him, because in the summer it's not so bad, but in the winter he wants the beard and the hair for warmth. As far as his clothing and dressing, I don't dress him too much. He's still capable of doing that. He won't wear underwear or socks. So what I did was buy a whole bunch of swimming trunks this year. They have that little inside kind of underwear. And the reason I did that is because when he had a bout of diarrhea, and that was really bad all through the house with no underwear on and his shorts. So the swimmer is shorter. They have that little thing, and they don't slide down his butt so much. So my sister, older sister who lives with us, isn't necessarily seeing more anatomy than she wants. Socks I don't push. I don't fight with them, because you kind of got to pick your battles. But he does have a really bad dry foot problem where his foot cracks. So he allows me to put medication on it and put socks on it, which he leaves on for about an hour because he says they're too hot. So we fight over that. He doesn't brush his hair. so I don't fight with him about that unless we're going out, and then I'll do it myself, and he's okay, he'll stand there, he doesn't do it. Inside out, again, I don't fight with him until we're going out, and then I just take them off and put them back on myself. That's about it. I know there's another question about teeth, and I'll leave that till later, because that's another big discussion. But
Sharon, how do you feel response of Randy having you take care of him as an adult man and telling him that he needs to shower and things like that? Clean his room?
Cleaning his room is a constant battle. He basically lives in a pigsty, and he does not want me to go into his room and touch anything or help him. I've offered to do it for him. I've offered to help him do it. He resists anything. And I think that's a thing of maintaining his independence and his privacy. And so I try to respect that unless it spills over into the shared part of the household. And I do try to get him to clean up dishes and food, things that become like a biohazard in his room. And finally, I hired somebody to come in and clean, and he will allow her to go in and clean his room.
Oh, that's interesting.
He will actually do some kind of surface cleaning in his room so that she can even get in there to do some cleaning. And so that's been a solution that's worked some for us. The other day, I took him for a drive while she was here, and she went in his room and she got rid of empty boxes that were in there, and she organized clothes, and he had clean clothes and dirty clothes just all end up in the same pile together. And so she graded things, and he was so happy about that. When we got home and he saw what she had done, he said, I wish she would come back so I could give her a hug. And so it was completely different from allowing me to go in there. So that's how I've dealt with it.
David's room is a biohazard too, now that you're mentioning rooms. He does allow me to go in and clean maybe once every 3 weeks or so. I try to get the dishes out of there, but just sending him in to do them doesn't work, or to get them until mealtime. And I'll be washing dishes and he will bring one up from the table. And I looked at him and I would say, oh, are there any in your room? And for some reason that works. He will go in and bring out a big pile of whatever he's got in there. He doesn't bring them all up, but he brings a lot of them out. If I'm related to something else, that seems to help too.
And someone asked,
Oh, no, go ahead.
no, you go.
Someone was wondering, Sharon, how much that would cost to bring someone in your home to do the cleaning of the room.
It depends on where you live, obviously. Here, I pay $85 for her to come in and clean the whole house, not just his room, but the whole house. We have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, and
And in
it's
Florida,
in Panama City. And I
Panama
mean,
City.
in different cities, things are really expensive here because we're near the beach and things are just high.
Makes sense.
It was cheaper in Tallahassee,
Yeah,
where we lived before we moved here,
yeah.
but that's what I pay here.
I wonder if in-home care, and Katrina, you may be like in-home services.
IHSS, like an in-home support service. I know that there's only certain states that do that, but like in California, I get financially compensated for my time to take care of my brother. Does it compensate for all the time I spend with him? Absolutely not. Does it compensate at high levels? Absolutely not. But it does cover some of the costs so that, let's say I did want to hire someone to go in to clean and I would take care of the other parts of caregiving, then that is something that's possible. That's another option to look into your different states and counties to see if anything like that is available, like some help with those
I
services.
did try that here and I was not able to get any services because he right now is considered to be able to do all of his ADLs. And he can bathe himself, he can dress himself, he can physically, he can do all of those things, but cognitively, he just can't. But they don't take that into consideration. So until he's physically not able to do those things, I cannot get that kind of help here. I know in different counties in Florida, it's different. So the best thing that you can do is to go through the Department of Elder Affairs in your county and see what your loved one is eligible for.
Great, thank you guys. Lauren, next one's for you. Do you have any advice for someone who is pre-symptomatic and would like to get involved with the HD community?
Yes, do it. It doesn't really matter how you do it. As long as you are involved, it is very rewarding being pre-symptomatic and helping not only yourself, but others. And whether it's being part of a support group, doing your own type of fundraiser. I started out fundraising, and as things happened, Dad got worse, something popped up, and I would get mad about situations like quality of life for people with HD was a big one, and I got mad. And so then I joined the advocacy group for the HD Parity Act because I was like, this has to change. So I used my anger and my feelings towards making something better, and I let it motivate me and become my passion rather than anger. And so then that went from advocacy and going and talking to different offices to then law enforcement education. When my dad went missing and I couldn't get law enforcement to help me, and I got angry about that. And so I was like, this isn't going to happen again, and really got into law enforcement education and got very into the research side of things because that part has been extremely rewarding for me and has really helped me. But yes, in whatever way you can get involved, small, big, or whatever, do it, just because it's a great way to know where everything stands and to get updates, to get support from a community that really cares like no other, and to help other people and yourself, and to have a way to cope when dealing with being pre-symptomatic. So however you can do it, get involved.
Thank you. Oh,
Our law enforcement education program actually began when the community got very angry about what had happened to a young man in West Virginia who had HD and had been taking his kids to the park and was stopped by the police and was beaten up and abused pretty badly by the police. And we as a community got very angry, and Help for HD decided this has to stop. And so we decided to put together a law enforcement education program to present at International Association of Chiefs of Police meeting that was coming up in a month in Florida. So we worked just day and night putting together this program and secured a booth at the police chiefs conference and got volunteers to go there with the materials that we had put together and started educating law enforcement about Huntington's. And that package has now expanded into training for EMTs as well as law enforcement. And both of those programs are available to anybody that requests them. And you as an individual can go into law enforcement or EMT in your community and ask to do a training, and you can use those materials to train law enforcement and EMT professionals about what to do if and when they encounter somebody with HD.
Yeah, and I think to go off that, Lauren, like you said, get involved, right, for you, but also our community, if you're willing, we need you to get involved, because the more we have, the more support, volunteers, the louder voice we have, the more we're going to get done. So don't ever feel intimidated about coming to Help for HD, HDSA, HSG, any of our organizations and say, I want to help with something, because we all need help. Like, we have to have loud voices. We have to be out there educating law enforcement. We have to be out there educating the FDA. We have to be out there educating. We need a lot done. There's a lot of ground to cover. So yes, get involved, because our community needs you to, because we have to stand up all together if we want change.
And Katie just made a really good point too. It doesn't matter what organization it is, because that's something that's really great about the HD community. There's collaboration. And so everybody is really works well together, and they know how to, and it's something that we have special to our community, that we're all in this together, and we really do act like that. And so absolutely join whatever. If you want something small, it's just sharing things on Facebook or sharing on Twitter and really getting the word out there. You can do that. If you're wanting to do a walk, we have templates on how you can do walks or other types of events. If you're wanting to advocate or participate in observational studies, there's somebody somewhere in this community that can tell you how to get involved and help you do it. It's not like we're going to say, here, do this, and then leave you alone. It's very much, okay, here, let me show you how to do this. And let me introduce you to this person who can help you with whatever information you need. So yeah, that's what's so great about our community.
Yeah. And I also think that it's interesting that any perspective, you could test negative, you can test positive, you can have a friend at risk, you can have a cousin at risk, anything, all your perspectives matter.
Absolutely. Okay, Helen, there are extended family members who do not know that my grandma had HD. My mom got HD and I have HD. My cousins are at risk but don't know. Should I tell them? And if so, how?
Okay, I'm struggling with this a lot in our family. Unfortunately, the Magnuson whole family didn't know that Huntington's was there, and I seem to be the one that is going about trying to tell them all. My stepchildren were pretty easy. I called them and told them about David and gave them their risk. However, my mother-in-law, of course, had 4 children. 2 we know were positive, and 2 I don't know whether they are or not. And they had kids, and the kids have had kids now, so we're into great-grandchildren. What I did, some of the things I did was at Christmas time, the letter that I included in the Christmas cards had as much information as I could put in it without being overly bombarding them with information. I am friends with a couple of my stepkids' cousins on Facebook. So I took May Huntington's Awareness Month to every couple of days, put what I considered important information that people needed to know about Huntington's disease on my Facebook page to educate. One of my granddaughters who is positive actually said, thank you, Grandma, for educating us and for letting us know, which made me feel really good that actually somebody's reading that. I also post every once in a while just something about Huntington so that they can at least see it. And of course, I have called a couple. There are still relatives who I know don't even know it's in the family. One of my husband would have had Huntington's. One of his sisters was misdiagnosed, and their daughter is in the medical field, and she totally is against the whole idea that it could be something else besides the cerebral spinal ataxia. So all you can do is do your best to give the information to as many of the family members as possible. That's kind of what I did and how I feel about it.
Thank you. Sharon, this is for you. My son is obsessively purchasing stuff online and getting upset when he runs out of money. I am his payee, but he demands his money and I don't want to argue. I'm open to any suggestions that you might have.
Okay, what I've done, I'm also Randy's representative payee, and I have a debit card that's tied to his deposits every month from Social Security. And I allow him to have that debit card, and when he runs out, he just runs out, and that's it. There is no more money. He does like to shop online a lot, and so I have tried telling him, don't buy anything online this month and see if you can save some money. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. That impulse is very hard to control, but as long as he has a limited amount of money available to him through that card, that seems to work pretty well for us.
Great. Thank you, Sharon.
Yeah, I
Okay.
feel that way with David too. He's not necessarily a big online purchaser. His purchases are always Xbox games. So he too has a small account that he can purchase all the Xbox games for the month that he wants. He has $150 in there, and when it's out, I told him you're out and you're done. And he usually spends that within the first 3 days of the month, and then he just plays with what he has until the end. It seems to work for him too.
One of the things that I have Randy do, we had a problem with him running out of cigarettes, and then he would want me to buy his cigarettes. And I don't want to buy cigarettes because I think they're so bad for him, but I know I can't stop him from smoking them. So we figured out how many cartons he needed a month, and he buys those at the beginning of the month. I think he buys 4 cartons. And so he doesn't run out, and I don't end up having to buy any cigarettes for him. And then any kind of little bills that he has, any subscriptions that he has, he pays those at the beginning of the month. And then any stuff, any money that he has left, he can do his online shopping, or he likes to walk down to the store and get an energy drink. And the energy drinks are what he runs out of money for. And so he'll ask me to buy him energy drinks, and I've ended up doing that. And then he reimburses me for them at the beginning of the month. So he's always playing catch up on that. But that's such a small thing that I just choose not to make a big deal out of it.
Has anybody, I'm just curious, has anybody tried like making it something visual for the person to see? Because sometimes I know for me, it's out of sight, out of mind. So if I have a visual, then I do better as compared to, okay, no, I made this purchase and then I forget. And then I know for me, that's helpful, having some type of visual that I can look at. And also distraction, like trying to, one of the things we did with Dad, because he liked to purchase too, but we would get him, like I personally would get him to look up stuff for me and then come back to me and tell me what he found. So then we could see if we could purchase it together and had the money to do it. But that way, at least he wasn't just automatically purchasing. He was spending more time researching and not actually spending the money. And then by talking to me, then he could, like, we could sit down and decide whether or not that was worth it or not, or if he wanted to save it for later.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Randy he has his bank account on his phone. And so he checks that every day. sometimes several times a day. So he always knows exactly how much money he has in his account, what he spent it on. It shows all of that. So I think that visual helps him to understand when he's run out of money and why he's run out of money. And then we don't have an argument about it.
So our next question is for Melissa. My son, so JHD, hard time staying awake, sometimes struggles with sleep. So let's talk about sleep and JHD. And what have you found with the sleep problems, like medication, and then also just ways of living, things that with Ava?
So I think for those of people on here that don't understand or don't know, JHD, sleep troubles with JHD kiddos it's very common for them. I thought I was the only one until I became part of the JHD community. So it's very common for their circadian rhythm to get all out of whack. And it doesn't matter if you put them to bed at 7, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, they have one night. And like for Ava, she might have one night that she's out of routine or just she can't sleep well. Then for the next 2 weeks or so, she's up all night. We tried melatonin. We didn't really have much success with that. But at this point, with the stage that she's in, I don't want to heavily sedate her with any kind of medication to help her sleep at night at this point. Not to say that we might not have to revisit it in the future, but for right now, we've chosen not to go that route. She goes her week or so, weeks, and then of being up at night, and then she'll go back to sleeping in a more normal routine, and she works herself back into a normal sleeping schedule. Right now, she's safe being up at night. If she is up at night, our bedroom's on the first floor, so we have our door open. I can hear her. She chooses to be on the phone or on the computer or things like that, playing her little games. And if she needs something, I can hear her. Not to say again, with HD, everything changes every so often. So in the future, it might look different, but for right now, it's manageable and choose to pick our battles. And that's not one that we choose to fight over at this time. In her mind, she just thinks it's part of being a normal teenager. And I guess in some ways it is, but
Yeah, true.
Hi, call time. So we are going to go over, we know in time, but let's try. We'll all just answer our own questions. Sorry, we have to now speed along.
Yeah.
Okay, so Sharon, my husband is always hot. It can be so hard to manage. We use a fan, the air conditioning, and nothing seems to help. Does anything work for your loved one?
This is a problem that we have not had yet. Randy seems to be okay with whatever the temperature is, but I would look for other causes besides HD. It may be that the thyroid is off. I know that with me, I am very intolerant of heat, and it's because of my thyroid. And I manage that with medication, and that can be true with HD. Just because you have HD doesn't mean you don't have another condition that can be affecting you. So
Thank you.
Helen, any suggestions on how to help with oral hygiene for someone that pockets food and doesn't like to brush?
Yes, David is terrible about brushing. And it ended up when I finally got him to the dentist not real long ago, he lost 2 teeth and has 9 cavities. I told him that wasn't acceptable, that we needed to do something about it. And that would be him brushing. He argues about some foods because I can't chew that. And so, of course, I look at him and remind him that to brush your teeth, you'll keep them longer. But I also decided to try to cajole him, tease him, and get him somehow to brush teeth with me. That worked a couple of mornings because I brush my teeth every morning, first thing I get up. And then he informed me that you don't brush your teeth in the morning, you do it at night. So I said, okay, we'll brush our teeth at night. I have no problem with that. So I got him to do that a couple of times in a week or two. And I said, what's wrong? You're fighting me on this. We're doing it together. And he said, the toothpaste burns my mouth. That was new to me. So I bought a different kind of toothpaste. And he says that works. So now it's just a mother-son thing we do every night. We have two sinks in the bathroom. I brush at mine and he sticks his brush in his mouth and moves it a few times. And then I say, no, you have to, I watch how he does it, try to get him to do the back and keep it in there a while longer, but at least he's brushing some. He's getting the toothbrush in his mouth, and that's where we are so far.
I love that. That's a hard one. Thank you. Sharon, what symptom is the hardest for you to manage as a caregiver?
Without a doubt, it would be the argumentativeness. And it may happen occasionally, and then later Randy will come and he'll apologize. And he's really very sweet and very loving. And so most of the time, if something like that happens, it'll be because he wasn't really awake yet or something like that, and it'll quickly pass. But if it turns into a pattern, then that is an indication to me that we probably need a med change. And so we've had to do that several times. And as soon as the meds are changed, that argumentativeness and irritability goes away and we're back on an even keel.
Thank you, Sharon. The next question is for Lauren. I have HD and have not started showing symptoms. When do you start talking to your kids about how I will start to change? My kids 6 and 9.
This was a difficult one because, again, it's a personal thing and what you're comfortable with and how your family works and stuff. I myself have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and my kids have been exposed to my dad with Huntington's. They are around my grandfather with Alzheimer's. One of the best tools that we had starting out was Jimmy Pollard's book, Finding Nana's Smile. And Zoe loved reading the book, and it really helped her to understand a little bit about like my dad not being normal. It's helped now with my grandfather too, and with Odin being 2 years old and stuff. But my kids, even now, know that something's not right, not with me, with my grandfather and that type of stuff. And so when they have questions, I answer them. So it's about what's age appropriate. They're not going to understand what Huntington's is. They're just going to understand that, or Alzheimer's or anything. They're going to understand, oh, Pawpaw is sick. And so as they get older and start asking more questions, my personal decision is I will constantly educate them. They will be going to events, and that's just what's appropriate for us, because I feel that it becomes a normal life rather than making them feel like we're in this really negative life. And I don't want them to feel that way. But that may not be appropriate for you and your family. It is really what is appropriate for you, and coming up with what you're comfortable with, what your spouse is comfortable with, and what your kids can handle. And I would highly recommend going on to HDYO and just looking at the content, thinking beforehand and seeing what you would feel would be appropriate for them to really introduce it to them.
Love it. Thank you. Melissa, can you explain to me how it was getting your Social Security for your family? Is there anything I should know to help me prepare?
Yeah, so that was the bane of our existence for a good 6 months, as it is for so many. I would say first thing, and I'll just, because I know we have to hurry up for time, but I would say first thing would be to get copies of your loved one's medical records, because that assists with filling out the application. You can make sure you use all the appropriate medical terminology to help explain the disease. The other thing is educate your caseworker. When they're assign you a caseworker for your case. I know the first time with Michael, when we called in, they were saying Huntington's disease isn't on the list. And I said, yes, it is. It's check under the A's, because it's on adult onset Huntington's disease. But she was about to tell me that it wasn't on the list. So educate your caseworker as much as possible. The main thing that made the difference too, and I need to thank my uncle for giving us this suggestion, is he said, did you try to reach out to your local congressman? And I thought, why would I do that? Well, with you, there's a thing that they can put on, they can flag your case with what's called a congressional inquiry. So I reached out, I typed up a letter sharing our HD story and a picture of our family, and explained our struggles with why the case wasn't approved and how it should be approved, and that it's on the compassionate allowance. It needs to be approved the first time. And within 30 days of that congressional inquiry on Michael's case, his case was approved right away. It was a simple process. There's no fee involved. We live in Pennsylvania. That's how it was in Pennsylvania. I know things are different state to state. I would hope that something like that would be across the board in every state. But had I known that ahead of time, I didn't know that ahead of time, I would have started there. I would have done that right away. So.
Thank you for that, Sharon. And then about that, if people have any questions for Melissa about her, because she went through a really hard process with Social Security. If you guys have any questions for things, I'm sure that if you reach out to us and ask her, she'll be willing to talk to you about their process.
Yeah, I would love to help anyone who needs help.
Yeah. Okay, Sharon, is it normal for your spouse to take everything out on you, yet act normal around others? I just don't know if this is them or a symptom.
Absolutely. But before I answer that, I want to piggyback on Melissa's question about Social Security. What we did was to hire an attorney that deals with Social Security, and they do not charge you anything unless they win the case. And if they win the case, then they get a certain percentage up to X amount of dollars of whatever back pay you're due. And so that may be a possibility for some people. So far as the spouse taking everything out on you and acting normal around others, that was absolutely the story with my husband, Paul, and me. He was verbally and emotionally and physically abusive. And when he would get around other people, he was charming, he was sweet, everybody loved him. They thought he was the most wonderful guy in the world. And it was like, what's wrong with you? And that was really hard. And we even did marriage counseling, and I'll never forget the marriage counselor looking at us one day, and it's like the proverbial light bulb had gone off over his head. And he said, I've been asking you to be more flexible, and you've been bending over so far backwards, the top of your head is touching the floor. And so it's real common for the person with HD to present very well to outsiders, friends, doctors, and it's just, yeah, it's just part of it.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. Helen, pertaining to VA, do you find big differences between the VA care and a movement specialist clinic? Also, does VA insurance cover HD specialists outside of the VA?
I haven't had experience with a specialist care outside of the VA. Not a movement specialist per se, although David gets his care at the Huntington Center of Excellence. He just saw speech, OT, PT. At the VA, the speech therapist was a very nice lady, but had no Huntington's experience. And David's speech is very hard to understand. And so we discussed that with the speech therapist at the Huntington Center, and she suggested that she send home specific exercises for the VA therapist to use. But she also suggested that I talk to his primary care doctor and see if we can't get him sent to the University of Southern Alabama, where the speech therapists do have Huntington's experience. So I will be working on that, but unfortunately it wasn't in time for this HIPE. The VA has been paying for all of his care outside of the VA. You do have to get it approved. He gets 2 visits at the Center of Excellence, and then you have to get the next 2 approved. So you just have to remember to make sure your primary care at the VA sends in for authorization. But they have been very good about covering everything.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for that. All right, so that is the conclusion of our HIPE panel. Thank you guys all so much for coming on with us today.